Oh man, here we go. Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley has finally been announced. And it's a scary fight for Tyron Woodley, man. Yes, he is a former UFC champion. Yes, he's one of the greatest welterweights of all time. But man, the guy's been put through the ringer. Has been knocked down, dragged out, dominated for the last 4 fights. And clearly not the same fighter he was even a couple years ago. And he's going up against a young, hungry boxer who's taken his skills seriously. Every time we've seen Jake Paul so far, he's gotten noticeably better. Who also, like Woodley, has one-shot knockout power. He's longer, he's taller, he's athletic. Again, he has the youth. He's been training in fundamental boxing, whereas Tyron Woodley has not really shown his fundamental boxing in fights that much. Watching his last fight against Vicente Luque, he was throwing haymakers and just trying to take the guy's head off. That's going to be difficult to work with when he fights Jake Paul, who again fights by the fundamentals. He fights with the basics. He's not going to make the same mistakes that Tyron Woodley does. Tyron Woodley mainly has that big right overhand. Nothing much else. He's fast, he's powerful, he can knock anybody out in the world. But Jake Paul can too. Not only with that, Jake Paul has the jab, he has the right straight, he has a good right uppercut. Just like Woodley, he also has a great backstep right overhand as a counterpunch. With that, he has a good aggressive right overhand. Coincidentally, the same punch he got hurt with when he fought Gilbert Burns. In the last 4 fights, Tyron Woodley has shown not great boxing, other than the first minute of the Gilbert Burns fight, where he was throwing jabs, he was moving around, he was using his footwork, all that stuff. Woodley's never been known for his boxing, he's only been known for his right hand, with a threat of wrestling. His boxing mostly relies on his physicality, his speed, his power. He definitely still has that one-punch knockout power. He can knock out Jake Paul at any given moment. He has a decent countering ability, mostly looking for the big right overhand. And coincidentally, Jake Paul has been countered by that right hand when he fought Ben Askren, who also trains with Tyron Woodley, and that is Tyron Woodley's biggest weapon in a fight. He's always going to be moving backwards. He gauges your attack and throws that right overhand as a counter. He's dropped various opponents with this exact same punch. But other than that, Tyron Woodley does not excel in boxing. He doesn't do much else other than that. And the problem going into this fight for him is, yes, he's powerful, he's fast, he's experienced, he's been training in boxing for a very long time, he has a very sharp right hand, but when opponents use fundamental boxing against him, such as even throwing out a jab at him, you tend to see the chosen one turn into the frozen one very quickly. Evident when he fought Rory McDonald, one of the only fighters he's ever faced to utilize a jab on him. Also in comparison, Rory McDonald and Jake Paul both have the same reach, which is something that Tyron Woodley doesn't really have to deal with that much in his career. Tyron Woodley has a long reach for his height, 74-inch reach for his 5'9" height. Rory McDonald is one of the only fighters he's ever faced to have a reach advantage over him. Jake Paul is going to be the next one. And not only that, Jake Paul is just clearly the better fundamental boxer. That's just what it is. He moves back for that right overhand counterpunch just like Woodley does. But the difference with Jake Paul is he's a lot more effective moving forward. Whereas Tyron Woodley naturally moves his back to the ropes, giving the longer fighter like Jake Paul an advantage. Why is it like that in this fight? Why is Jake Paul just going to have a natural advantage coming to the fight like that? It's because it's boxing. There is no wrestling threat. Wonderboy Thompson delayed his aggression and willingness to throw more strikes. Right, Wonderboy Thompson, when you allow him to control the fight, he will start unloading on you. But there's a reason why the Wonderboy fights were some of the most boring fights of all time. Wonderboy Thompson was leading and he was always cautious of the takedown the entire fight. So he ultimately just didn't engage as much. But in contrast, when you see Wonderboy fight Vicente Luque, when you see him fight Jorge Masvidal, guys who are not going to take him to the ground, Wonderboy Thompson doubles his output. In boxing, there is no wrestling. Tyron Woodley has to just rely on his boxing skills. Imagine if Wonderboy Thompson fought Tyron Woodley and Tyron Woodley could not attempt takedowns. It would even be a close fight. That's not to compare Wonderboy Thompson to Jake Paul, because obviously Wonderboy's a much better striker, much better boxer than Jake Paul is. But thinking of it like that allows you to compare Tyron Woodley's striking skills, his boxing skills, to his opponent. If Woodley was not able to shoot in for takedowns in fights, he would not be nearly as successful as he was. This is why when he fought actual wrestlers like a Kamaru Usman, like a Colby Covington, he fought a guy he did not want to take to the ground like a Gilbert Burns, he just could not deal with them because they were not afraid of him anymore. All they had to worry about was his right hand, and that was it. Woodley was not going to take him to the ground, and they knew that. All of a sudden, Tyron Woodley's wrestling threat disappeared, and Tyron Woodley had to rely on his boxing skills. And they fought a guy only being worried by one attack, that right overhand, and that's it. That's why they dealt with him very easily. Same thing here. Jake Paul has the same notion going into this fight that Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, and Gilbert Burns also had. He does not have to be worried about takedowns, and only has to be worried by the right overhand, and that's it. Jake Paul is not going to respect Tyron Woodley. He knows Tyron Woodley's shot, he knows he's over the hill, and he knows he has a limited amount of boxing skills. Yes, he's dangerous, he's fast, he's powerful, but he's not going to respect Tyron Woodley the way Wonderboy Thompson, Darren Till, all these guys in the past have. This is a fight that Tyron Woodley may very well lose. It's very possible. We cannot sleep on a guy like Jake Paul. His fundamental boxing skills are superior to what we've seen from Tyron Woodley. And the other thing is, Jake is getting better. And just like Tyron Woodley has knockout power, so does Jake Paul. With the fact that Tyron Woodley's chin is not the same anymore, means that it's very likely that Jake Paul knocks out Tyron Woodley as well. And that's a sad realization for MMA fans. We can't be throwing our old, over-the-hill, worn-down wrestlers to box someone like Jake Paul. Because I can very well see that Jake Paul beats Tyron Woodley, 100%. I can absolutely see this. He might be able to keep Tyron Woodley backed up to the ropes, using his jab, throwing a lot of feints at him like he always does to opponents, finding the opening, engaging that right hand. Once he has it locked down, and Woodley exposes himself, you're going to see the right hand start to land. Woodley's either going to do two things in this fight. He's going to be in that scenario and look to counter with his right overhand at any given moment. Or we see Tyron Woodley blitz forward and be physical and try to take this guy's head off just like he did against Vicente Luque. Honestly, with both scenarios, I see Jake Paul winning. I see him winning being the aggressor and winning in a firefight. Winning in the firefight only because Tyron Woodley is shot at this point and he exposes himself so much. This is going to be a different level of power, of course. It's going to be a different level of ferocity. Jake Paul's never fought a guy who's thrown punches like Tyron Woodley does. So ultimately, this is going to test Jake Paul's composure in the fight and how well he deals to stand in front of that threatening power. If he goes and beats someone like Tyron Woodley, like a lot of people believe he's actually the favorite in the fight, nobody can sleep on Jake Paul anymore. Nobody can say he's not a real boxer or with any kind of boxing skill. He doesn't have power. He's not that kind of guy. He's not a fighter at heart, all that stuff. If he beats Tyron Woodley, all that goes out the window. He's decently skilled. He's obviously not a good professional boxer. He's not going to be compared to professional boxers, but he's good enough to beat wrestlers who have boxed for a long time. And the next opponent he has to be someone who possesses striking skills. Whether it even be a kickboxer, Muay Thai fighter, doesn't actually have to be a boxer. Jake Paul would get the kind of respect where he has to fight guys like that from then on. No more wrestlers, no more old vets like that. Chuck Liddell, I know he thinks he could beat Jake Paul, but he's not beating Jake Paul. And honestly, all the theatrics, all the cringe, and the YouTuber display that Jake Paul has to him, it does blind a lot of people, even blinded me for a bit, about how good he actually is as a boxer. The fact he's going in there and throwing blows with opponents, not giving them respect, and actually showcasing decent fundamental skills, where even other professional boxers are admitting that he's pretty good for his skill level, shows to everybody, man, that he is not someone to look over. He is not someone to underestimate. His knockout power alone should allow people to give him that kind of respect. A guy who can punch for real and willingness to throw bombs at someone's face, that alone deserves some respect. Now, this isn't to say that you have to respect him as a person, because that's something a lot of people aren't going to do, but just strictly as a boxer, take the name away, looking at how he boxes in there, that alone deserves a bit more respect than what he's given. As a person, he's pretty vile. There's no way around that. So guys, I don't know how this fight is necessarily going to go down, but I do mostly expect Jake Paul to win this fight. But hopefully, Tyron Woodley is able to pull this off somehow. He takes this very seriously. He does not underestimate Jake Paul, because it is very easy to underestimate the guy. If Tyron Woodley wins, if he can end the Jake Paul circus, I'll buy his album, man. I'll do it. I will listen to no other music besides Tyron Woodley spitting bars, and he will become the hero of MMA for a while.